Hello and welcome into the Touchdown NFL pod. My name is Lee, your regular host, and I'm joined by Jack and Rory, also from the Touchdown, our draft and college football leads. And we're here to discuss some draft classes. Obviously, we're just coming off the back of the NFL draft, had a few days to simmer down from that and take a breath, catch up with some sleep, as we were just chatting about before we got on. And we're going to make our assessments. We're going to go run through some of our favourite classes, some head scratching classes, and also a few of our favourite picks from each of the 3 days of the NFL draft. But boys, how are we doing? Obviously, like I say, long weekend. But Jack, I'll start with you. How are you doing? How was the Packers draft class for yourself?
Yeah, it was good. I think the Packers draft classes are always a weird one because they're never necessarily the most exciting on the day, but they always seem to turn out pretty good. So it was solid, but I think it's going to probably exceed expectations. So yeah, I was quietly pleased.
I do find that. I find it really difficult to play the Packers because I feel like yourself and the rest of the Green Bay follows that I've got, you kind of have an inside knowledge of all the little minutiae of things that the Packers look for, whereas that's not really public knowledge for other fans of the other 31 teams, I would say. So it probably seems worse than it is for other fans of other teams.
Yeah, definitely. It's they do things their own way. They are very much kind of one of a kind, I think, when it comes to the draft.
But have been successful for many years. So obviously must work, must have the formula
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And Rory, what about yourself? How are you doing, and how do you think the Bengals did over the weekend?
Yeah, it was good. It was exciting for a Bengals fan. It was a different type of draft class. I think we're quite used to being quite buttoned up under Zach Taylor. A lot of captains usually, and a lot of sort of high character guys. And it was a bit more of a mixed bag this time round. We had obviously guys with Jermaine Burton with a bit of character concerns, and Eric Hall with injury things. And I think what Taylor's done is put in a situation now where he feels he can drop those players in, take a big swing. And if they might just come off because he's got the players around there that can sort of deal with it. We've got the culture that's working under Burrow and the guys on the defensive side of the ball, like Logan Wilson, the leaders in that room. So it's going to be a boom or bust class. I think we could end up with 4 or 5 starters out of it, or we could be looking at it in a few years' time, thinking, crikey, we should have gone for some safer picks. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think my initial reaction was actually one that I really liked, the Bengals draft class. I thought it does have a really high ceiling. I guess it's one of those things, isn't it, where you've got to really push the chips in the middle of the table if you're chasing the Chiefs and the Bills and the rest of the teams in the AFC now.
Yeah, I think that was the thing, wasn't it? And I think you saw that where they were going for value a lot of the times. Obviously, we double dipped with tight ends, double dipped with defensive tackles. I think they were keen on taking the guys that were at the top of their board, whether or not they'd addressed the position earlier in the draft. It wasn't sort of one of these. I know when we do perfect picks, you do that sort of jigsaw thing where you try and fit sort of 7 or 8 players and you get a piece of everyone, but it doesn't work like that. If the draft board says you do end up double dipping at positions, and I think they're at ease with that. That's the way their structure works. They want to take the best guy available.
Or if you've got no wide receivers whatsoever, then you do triple dip, as the Chargers did. However, I did come away really satisfied with the Chargers, I will say. I thought, just really doing their own thing, really leaning into the Jim Harbaugh way, and Joe Hortiz coming from the Ravens and picking BPA a lot of the time. I thought it was really good, and really excited. I don't think the Chargers will be great this season, but was really satisfied with what they came away with for the draft, and can at least look forward to the season now, and not do what the Las Vegas Raiders did and really reach in the 3rd round on Tom Telesco, which was absolutely classic for him. But maybe we'll throw some shade at them later. You never know. So we'll come in and we'll start on the positive notes. We'll come into our favourite draft classes. I think we've got 3 good ones to talk about. But Rory, I'll come back to you for your favourite draft class. We'll kick off there.
Yeah, so I selected the Eagles. I thought that was a really strong draft, and obviously Howie gets a lot of plaudits in the media. I know people have been saying it, and obviously there was the Nick Wright thing where he sort of said about Howie going with the consensus board, and then he gets a lot of plaudits and a lot of people saying he knows how to draft because he sticks to sort of similar to what the media expects him to do. But if you look at the actual players, the key need for them was a secondary. They needed younger players. I mean, Bradbury and Slay were in there as the starters, so immediately Quinn and Mitchell fall into them at that spot in the first round. I thought that was a brilliant pick. And I kept thinking, as a Bengals fan, he interested me at pick 18. So I think he was really good value for where the Eagles got him. And then they went back to the secondary and got Cooper DeJean, who was obviously a little bit of a surprise faller out the first round. And I think he'll slot in really well there. I think he'll challenge. I know they've got him marked down as maybe a nickel back on our lads' depth chart at the minute. I think he'll challenge Reed Blankenship for a safety role there. But they'll move him around in that defense, and I think that's the beauty of having him. And then obviously later on, I just thought they were really strong. The Will Shipley, I was a big fan of, just a big sort of utility back. He can do everything. He can catch passes. He'll fit in that backfield nicely. Jeremiah Trotter was a guy that people weren't high on out of Clemson, and I know that he started off the season, pre-season, everybody's like, oh, it could be a first rounder. And that's difficult for a player like him. But then for him to drop to the 5th round and the Eagles take advantage of that, I actually think that's quite good value for a player like him. And I think he'll be a pro and you'll get value out of him on special teams initially. And then if you look, obviously there was Anais Smith, the change to the kickoff rules. He's a player that might be somebody that they earmarked for that role. Johnny Wilson out of Florida State, again, big target man. Whether or not he'll transition to tight end or not, I'm not sure about that, but I think he represents good value in the 6th round. And then they've got a couple of O-line there. Trevor Keegan was experienced at Michigan, Dylan McMahon. So they're going to benefit from the structure that's in place at the Eagles, and they always seem to do well with O-line. So right through, I think they just look like they've got great value to me, and I think especially attacking your main need and getting 2 high-quality players, that's what makes it a really strong draft for me.
Yeah, it was very Eagles, wasn't it? It's like, like you say, starting with the very first pick, having one of the superstars of the draft fall to you, like you say, it's just what happens every year, isn't it? Jack, what did you think of the Eagles draft overall?
I liked it. I would have been happy with Cooper DeJean going to Green Bay. So it was one of those where I was like, but yeah, I think it's another one where I like how Howie drafts. And I think this is just another good class. Like Roy said, that there's been some chatter about kind of how he's drafted and whether or not it's been a success. But I think his track record does speak for itself. And I think some people are kind of picking and choosing what they like with how the Eagles have drafted in recent years. And I think they're just one of those teams that doesn't try and get cute. I don't think they just draft good football players, and it's not a kind of complicated strategy. But it every year we're saying this, aren't we? Every year there is that guy that we're like, we let it happen, and it's happened again.
Another thing out of that draft class as well, actually, was when I looked at it again, the way they moved up and down the board. They've got 9 picks next year as well, so they have got extra value out of it. So sometimes that gets ignored, doesn't it? You look at the players that they've taken, but actually, I do like the way that Howie manoeuvres around, and he's getting 9 picks next year, but that doesn't mean that he's going to spend them. He'll use them in season. If he needs to make additions to his roster, he'll burn one or 2 of them if he needs to.
I think that the smart thing on that as well is, based on what kind of those who are really deep into this are saying, is that next year's class, the depth is going to be much better. I know there's going to be talk about the top of the class, but because of the fact that there's no COVID year players to deal with, there's going to be a kind of deeper pool on days 2 and 3. So getting ahead of that and stockpiling those picks for next year could be one of those moves that when the draft rolls around next year, we're looking at and going, what a smart move.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to piggyback off what Rory said, it's that willingness to always have something on the go, always have an iron in the fire, move around the board, and then it doesn't stop after draft weekend, does it? It's like what Rory said, it's making improvements to the team no matter what it is throughout the season. Whether it's picking up someone from a day 3 pick towards the trade deadline, they're just always taking chances, and they don't hit on the wall, but when you've taken a chance, then you've got a chance to get better all the time. It's I've come away from seeing Tom Telesco, second mention of the pod so far, we've done 9 minutes, where he just stood pat in the draft for most of the time and then never did anything pre-season or in the season. Sorry, so it's stagnation that can kill you at the end of the day, isn't it? Standing still is going backwards a lot of the time in the NFL. So yeah, I can respect it, and like I say, hopefully the GM in charge of my team will be more how you like in that way. So yeah, no, like I say, they kill it every year, don't they? And address needs. I was a bit surprised that they didn't go too much on the defensive line, which is something that they usually do. They've only got Alex Hunt on the edge, but tend to pick up an interior guy or two. But like I say, maybe they'll do that in season. And it's not like they haven't had a lot of movement around that area of the team with the trades that they've made and the free agency signings that they've made as well. So yeah, really, really good draft for the Eagles. Jack, we're going to stay in Pennsylvania by the looks of things for yourself.
Yeah, so there were a couple of classes I liked, but I really like what the Steelers did. Again, another team that just draft well. I liked the players they picked. I thought, that's the main reason I liked it. But I think the thing that really kind of hammers it home for me is, again, that point around teams not being too overconfident in their own evaluation. I'm sure people have seen the stuff on the consensus board. I know there's multiple versions of it out there nowadays, but Arif Hassan's consensus board has been put out every year. You look at reaches on the consensus board, they tend to not work out. You look at the teams that do well, they tend to be the teams who maximize value on the consensus board. If you look at where the Steelers' top 100 picks came in terms of where they were, you got Troy Fautanu in the first round, which I think fits a need, but also was good value. He was 17th on the consensus board. They got him at 20. Zach Frazier from West Virginia, again, another need on the offensive line. That offensive line is looking a lot better after draft day. Again, they got him 51. He was 41 on the consensus board. Peyton Wilson, now I know there was injuries involved here, but even still, he was 44 on the consensus board. They got him at 98. And then Roman Wilson, who I thought would go, probably second round, maybe even top 50 pick.
Yeah.
Ricky Pearsall went first round, so I was quite surprised to see him fall. He was 53 on the consensus board. They got him at 84. Now you look at that, and that's all 4 picks are below. They got them later than the consensus board would suggest. They didn't really reach at all, according to the consensus board, until pick 178. Which was picking Iowa defensive lineman Logan Lee. So it's like if that's the first part of your draft that I can go after, I think that says a lot. You've added a nice complementary receiver in Roman Wilson to what you've got in George Pickens. I think there's obviously the quarterback question there and what the hell that's going to look like this year, and I've got no idea. But the draft is more than just the next season, right? And I think if you're looking beyond, Russell Wilson's not the long-term solution there. I don't think Justin Fields is either. But whoever that might be, you're setting them up for success for the future. And I think, that's exactly what you need to be doing. So I thought it was a really good draft.
Yeah, I'd agree. Rory, can we come to you first, though? Are you going to be complimentary as about a division rival?
I am. It was, I think, across the board in the AFC North. I kept seeing the picks coming in, and it always happens with the Ravens. We know the Ravens have a liking for taking falling players, and I thought the Browns, when they eventually got on the board, also did well. So it was a bit of it just felt like everybody in the AFC North was smashing the picks.
Yeah, I'd agree.
From a Steelers point of view, I just like the way that they always seem to marry their drafts to players that just epitomise what the team's about, and I think that's a really strong thing. I think you see it from Detroit as well now that Dan Campbell's got that sort of the way he holds himself and what he expects from players. He just chimes to the guys they get in the draft. And I think that offensive line heavy start to the draft, and then Peyton Wilson as well, they just scream Steelers picks, and I think they'll fit in really well. And I was a big fan of Fautanu, so it'd be interesting to see him. But the other thing with the AFC North was every time somebody took, like 2 picks later, somebody else in the AFC North would take the same position. So we're going to have those battles. So we have like Fautanu and Mims. We took Mims just before Fautanu. So it'd be interesting to see how their careers go. And obviously Jermaine Burton and Roman Wilson as well, similar ranges. So it'd be interesting to see who gets the better of those in the long run.
Yeah, interesting battles, like you say, on the draft board across the war rooms around the league. I was on the Go for Two pod with Liam earlier this week, and I rated this as one of my highest rated drafts in the AFC. We just covered the AFC, so I didn't actually rate the Eagles on that pod, but I just, like you say, couldn't really pick a hole in this. The only hole that I was able to pick really, and I kind of didn't want to pick holes in like 6th, 7th rounders because whatever, that's late day 3 picks at the end of the day is, that Peyton Wilson might have too many injuries to be an effective player, but like it's a 3rd round pick on what could be the best linebacker in the class. So again, it's kind of like whatever, really, isn't it? And I couldn't really pick a fault in it. So yeah, another great draft. And we know that Mike Tomlin's going to elevate everyone on the roster. And as you say, Jack, it's going to be when the quarterback does get dropped into it, the support system's going to be there both on and off the field. So yeah, they just knocked out the park again. And I think for a team that's done quite well in the draft for a few years now, recently.
Yeah, they're just good teams. Good teams stay good because they draft well. And I think both the teams we've mentioned so far are exactly that.
Yeah, absolutely. My team is not one that you could say that about, but hopefully, they are going to be that from their point of view. However, mine's the Cardinals, and I actually do think they have followed this up with the 2nd good draft in a row. I feel like the Cardinals had a really good draft this weekend. Obviously, started off at the top. Marvin Harrison fell into their laps as a result of the QBs falling the way that they did. And as we talked about the possibility of trading up, trading back as a draft community, as a group together, they just stood pat and just took the best non-QB and potentially, the 2nd best overall player, or to some people, the best overall player in the draft. So that's a good way to start, let's say. And, they just don't have to think about wide receiver 1 now for the next decade. Plus, they've got their new Larry Fitzgerald. They can surround Kyler Murray and, and Marvin Harrison with the rest of the talent. And, they've pretty much got the top end of that taken care of. But overall and beyond Marvin Harrison, I just really like what they did from round 1 to 5. Every player that they took, I think, most importantly, made sense for what their team needed. And a few of my guys as well, a few guys that I really liked as well, which obviously is going to make me favourite. By favourite, obviously, we're not saying this is the best draft class, but, that's what I mean. So Darius Robinson, my guy, on the edge, defensive line, Xavier Thomas, I think gives them a diverse pair of pass rushers to go at the rest of the division with. And then obviously they drop in Isaiah Adams and Christian Jones. Christian Jones, who just, fell into the laps again after he was dropping. He was, up on the NFL Network stream. He was really high on Daniel Jeremiah's board. I think he was just outside the top 50. And, they obviously got him on day 3. And then to get players who are really going to make an impact, I think, early on in their careers, like Trey Benson, Max Melton, DTD, they're just going to be filling out the secondary for years to come. And obviously the running back position is taken care of after James Conner leaves town, which, could be fairly soon. So, yeah, like I say, Melton and Robinson were my guys. Marvin Harrison's almost everyone's guy. And then they've got players from last year like Paris Johnson, Garrett Williams, Michael Wilson, maybe, who are going to form a core along with these guys long term. So not only starters just now, but also them, adding in what they've done in free agency. I feel like if the NFC West wasn't so tough, they'd be my Texans for this year. Texans, the team who I was banging the drum for, saying they'll be better than most people are thinking that they will be. I can't really go that far this year because they've got such a tough division. But generally speaking, I think they're really on the up and up with how they're manoeuvring around the draft board. What do you guys think of the Cardinals? Rory, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I liked it. I think that was the big decision that I liked the most was staying put at 4, because I think they could have got cute there and tried to move back. And I think because Monty did it last year, everybody was like, oh yeah, he'll move back and then he'll try and shoot back up. Sometimes you just have to look at the players. And to me, my personal board, I had Marvin Harrison above the other 2 guys at wide receiver. And I just didn't see any point in disrupting that. He was a true top 5 guy and you're getting a shot at him. So why shift out? Robinson, I wasn't as high on, but I can see the reasoning behind the pick. I know, and then the rest of it, when you have that many picks, you're gonna hit. It feels like they're gonna hit on that, but they do need to because there was holes all over. So really, it was one of those where you couldn't really go wrong because you had that many picks and that many holes. But I think strong, like you say, made the good points there about every position that they addressed.
Jack, what about yourself? What do you think of Arizona's draft?
Yeah, I liked it. I think one of the things I really liked, going Marvin Harrison Jr., it's not, we've talked in the past about them trading back, but I think, again, like, there's only so many times you can trade back and accumulate extra picks. And I think sometimes it's like, just take the guy who is going to be, a franchise-defining player going forward. I also like that because as a big Michael Wilson fan, I think that allows him to thrive. I think he's a great player, but I don't think you necessarily want him as your go-to guy. So I think they've now got what I think is actually a really good young 1-2 duo. Max Melton was one of my favorites. I wanted him in Green Bay. Trey Benson, I thought was fantastic. Again, long-term heir for Connor, but doesn't need to come in and be the guy right away. And even like Tip Ryman, the tight end from Illinois, like late on. Drew Petzing is one of the most, I think, interesting offensive coordinators in the league at the moment. And I think he's going to be sniffing around head coaching opportunities next year because he's kind of creative with how he uses personnel. And I think seeing how he uses tight ends, how he mixes up formations now with guys like Ryman on the team will be, it'll be an interesting watch for sure. For once, we were able to say that the Cardinals are going to be a fun team to watch. And it feels like a long time since we've been able to say that.
Yeah, it does. And I don't know if this comes into general manager just thinking it probably doesn't. But with a player like Marvin Harrison, you don't want to be on like cold takes or a meme or anything like that for the guy who passed up on Marvin Harrison. So sometimes, like I say, it's just good to take the best player in the class, potentially, and just be that guy who did the simple thing, did the right thing, and didn't get too cute with it, like you say. So, yeah, three really good drafts. Is there any other teams that kind of stood out to you as having really good drafts that we didn't really mention so far? Rory, what about you?
Like I said, I think the Ravens was.
You've already gone through a few, haven't you?
Yeah, and I think they just. I quite liked. Was it Roger Rosengarten in the second, and so they got Nate Wiggins in the first. So obviously, guys that can come in and make a difference straight away, and they always just seem to do well in drafts, and it's always like watching behind your hands as a Bengals fan, thinking, who's gonna have to face. So yeah, that's the other one that I'd pick out.
Yeah, I had a little bit of that one with one of my other favourite drafts as well, because I thought the Chiefs had a really good draft throughout. I thought they, especially making the trade with Buffalo as well. I don't know how the Bills managed to, kind of let them do that really. Although I'm not the biggest Xavier Worthy fan, but like don't trade with one of your biggest AFC rivals. It's a bit confusing, but yeah, I thought the Chiefs did really well. Obviously taking Kingsley Suamataia. Obviously got Hunter Nolzad as well. So yeah, I just thought they did really well, and it's a massive shame as a Chargers fan to say that. But before I get too salty, Jack, have you got any others that you kind of want to shout out as a favourite draft class or team that did really well?
Like what Colts did. I thought they just the good players fell to them, and they were willing to take a risk. And I think whether it's Latu or AD Mitchell, yes, there's risk involved, but I think the upside in both is worth that risk. And then there were a couple of weird ones, which was for similar reasons, which were Washington and Denver, which I liked almost everything except the first pick of each draft. So it's one of those, like, I was watching, if you just kind of ignore the first round, I was like, I love this. And then you go, oh my God, you took Bo Nix at 12. And then I can't then go, oh, it's one of my favorite classes, because then it's going to look like I endorse that. And I
endorse that. Yeah. That's interesting. So we'll come on to the head scratching classes, and I'll just kick off that because Denver was actually one of mine, and it goes a little bit deeper than just Bo Nix for me. I don't know if you guys will disagree with this, because I've kind of come up with this, and I said this on the Go For Two pod as I mentioned earlier. But I have seen like a lot of people talking up the Denver class. I don't know if I'm just getting this completely wrong or whether I'm buying too much into it. You guys can let me know once I've kind of given my 2 cents about it. But I just don't think they've added too much that like raises the ceiling for their team. And they're not very good now. But, we've talked about Bo Nix. I think they've overdrafted a limited ceiling QB at pick 12. Maybe this is a bit hindsighty, but as the rest of day 2 played out with like the biggest gap between quarterbacks ever, wasn't it? Could they have waited for him? Could they? Did they panic a little bit? And then against my evaluations, I was never a big Joe Norellis guy. That was obviously an our draft guide. I think I had a 4th round grade on him. Franklin is a smaller X receiver when they've already got Colton Sutton. Felt a bit redundant. However, they might trade Colton Sutton, I don't know, but to keep them both is a little bit redundant, and it still seems like a bit of a downgrade against aggressive corners that you're going to come up against in that division. Troy Franklin could get bullied. And yeah, I mean, I just wasn't ever the biggest fan of a lot of their players. Like Audric Estime, I thought there was better running backs available. The only pick that I really liked was Chris Abrams-Drain. But again, is he going to have to be a CB1 soon because they're going to trade Patrick Surtain? I don't know. So again, that's a massive downgrade. So yeah, when you're coming up against the teams that you're coming up against, like the Chiefs, hopefully the Chargers, the Raiders are going to be an upwards trending team, I think. Did they do enough by taking Bo Nix and then to fill out the rest of the team? I'm not sure. So that was a bit head scratching for me. What do you guys think? Jack, what about yourself? Since you kind
So
of like
the
this.
reason I liked it is because there's a couple of my guys in there.
Okay,
I
that
was a Troy
opposite of me then.
Franklin fan. I say was. I still am. And am a Audric Estime fan. But I think that
Okay.
the head scratching part for me, and this is something I think, like the Michael Penix pick has obviously got all the headlines. And I think we've maybe not talked enough about the Bo Nix pick.
It
I
definitely took
think,
the heat off.
yeah, my biggest issue with it, right, is, and I guess I was relatively high on Nix, like not as high as Sean Payton, but for me, I don't think even big Bo Nix fans would say you're getting a guy who's going to be a top 10 quarterback. I think the appeal with Bo Nix is the floor is high, the ceilings may be low, but the floor is high. And I think when you talk about those kind of quarterbacks, the way you sell that vision is get him in on a rookie deal, kind of like what Miami's done with Tua, surround him with talent, and then hope that by spending elsewhere, you can kind of lift the ceiling of that offense. The thing that confuses me about this is they're spending 64 million on their quarterback room. That's not including Knicks, I don't think, this year, which is the most in the league behind Cleveland, I think, because they're paying Russell Wilson not to be on. And they're paying Jared Stidham $7 million. Next year, they're paying Russ 32 million to not be on the roster. So you're not getting the benefits of a rookie deal until 2026. So it feels like from a finance perspective, you're kind of looking at almost a Daniel Jones in the Giants situation of once you start paying that guy the money, you're going, well, hang on a minute, how the hell else am I going to build this roster around it? And that's the bit that confused me. I like the rest of it. I just don't see the timeline matching up. Why not just punt this year? Find a QB next year. I know we're talking down the QB class. I think there's several QBs in this upcoming class who are better than Bo Nix.
Okay. So I guess it comes down to Sean Payton's personality then, to not getting along with Russell Wilson. That's kind of been to the detriment of this whole scenario, I guess. And you traded a pick for him as well. Rory, what did you think of the Broncos class?
Yeah, I think the Knicks thing's going to be the thing that overshadows it really, unless he does something spectacular. It just feels like Sean Payton got hold of it and wanted a solution at quarterback, and he obviously has the belief that he can do great things with whoever he gets in there. But like I say, it seemed like a reach. Do we really think that other teams behind were going to sort of step up and take Knicks? So I agree with all of those points. The only thing I did like was the Franklin pick. I just thought for both him and Knicks, that familiarity, the fact that Franklin was kind of a faller on the consensus board in that by the fourth round, if you're taking that punt, you're giving Knicks a target early on that's going to help him out, and Franklin as well, somebody that he's got a bit of chemistry in, which is going to hopefully help him settle in and be a factor on this on the offensive side of the ball. So I did like that pick because I thought the value of it was okay. Not that I was a massive Franklin fan, but at that point it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's understandable. We'll stick with you, Rory, for your head scratcher.
Yeah, so I was in a similar kind of feeling to you, really. Whereas I looked through all the draft classes when you sent the text through saying this is what we're going to do, and I was pretty sure that I'd picked one that I didn't like very much. And then I listened to podcasts like we all do, and you listen to the reaction from everybody, and everybody was like talking it up, and I'm thinking, what am I seeing that they're not seeing? But I picked the Cowboys, and it just the biggest issue for me is this is a team that really should be pushing under Dak Prescott to be making a Super Bowl now, to be making a serious run. And when you get to that position, you do have to, I know we always say draft for, best possible if you can. You don't worry about your needs too much. But when you're that close, you do have to fill out certain bits of your roster. You need to be looking at the weaknesses and saying, look, if we can plug a couple of starters in here, this is going to be a major upgrade for us. So it wasn't that I disliked the guys that they took. It was that I don't see them making them immediately better and helping the push towards a Super Bowl. So Tyler Guyton in the first, people are talking themselves into it when all I heard going up to draft was how raw Tyler Guyton was, and that you wouldn't want to be in the boat where you had to take him because you needed an offensive tackle at the end of round 1, and he was the last one that was sort of passable as a first round pick, which is where the Cowboys found themselves. But they do need a starting left tackle. So are they going to be pushed into a situation where Guyton starts straight away? To me, that's not where you'd want to be. Cooper Beebe, I think, comes in straight away. I like that pick. I think he comes in and he's the centre from day one. And then Marshawn Neeland, I don't dislike the player, power rusher, and I can see the value in it. And he's going to be the long-term answer behind DeMarcus Lawrence. But do we need it now? When I look at the other bits of the roster, I'm thinking linebacker, they got Leah Fowl in the 3rd round, which I thought was a reach. I don't see him being an immediate starter. So you're down to Eric Kendricks remains as a starter.
Which isn't good, I'll tell you that.
No. And then the other thing I've got is Jalen Tolbert is a starter as a wide receiver. So we didn't address that. We've got CD Lamb to pay. And then the final one is obviously the elephant in the room, the running back, which in hindsight now, everybody has spent weeks saying how much they needed a running back. And now everybody's like, oh, well, they'll make it work. They'll bring Zeke back. And I'm like, and this was, to me, this wasn't a class where there was loads of top running backs, but it was deep. There was like 7 or 8 guys in the 3rd and 4th round. Just take one of them. If you take one of them, I'm sort of happy with that. If you take a Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, plug some of them guys in. And it's just the way that they kept ignoring. I think linebacker, wide receiver, and running back were three areas that really needed addressing if you're going to make a serious push. And they didn't get anybody that's going to make a difference in them slots.
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree. The running back thing is kind of weird, isn't it? Because can you guys confirm this? I think I saw a tweet to this effect saying that they've already got they've still got dead money from when they released Zeke on the books for this year. Is that right?
Yeah, they were paying him, I think, like $6 million in dead money to not be on the team. Yeah.
And now he's on the team again. It's just, it doesn't seem like it's well run at the moment, does it?
Well, and then the whole like Jerry Jones press conference talking about Jonathan Brooks after day 1. Did you guys see that? When he was like, oh, he's high on our board. It's like the best interview I've done in 30 years. And the rest of the Dallas front office is like, Jerry, shush. Stop, Jerry. And it's just like that kind of thing. Me like, who is putting this guy out in front of the cameras? Like, what is going on here? Then Carolina obviously just take him, and I wonder if he was just so salty after that. He was like, "Fine, let's just have Zeke instead."
I think that's the disconnect, though, isn't it? It's because that's what I'm hearing. Is everybody who analyzes this sort of thing loves Will McClay as a de facto GM and the way that he runs drafts, which is fine. I get that. But if you're not married up to the front office and how the front office are approaching the needs and building a roster, you can draft all the really good players that you want. But there seems to be like there's a breakdown between those two things where the front office isn't willing to sort the contract side out of it and plug the gaps. And Will McClay's here drafting players that everybody thinks is really good, and we still can't make it work to get to a Super Bowl.
Yeah. Have Dallas come out and said that Guyton is going to play left tackle? Or have they said it's kind of open? Have either of you seen that? Because I suppose they could put Tyler Smith at left tackle and play him on the right, play Cooper Beebe in the guard spot. I don't know.
That's what I looked at, and I was going to say is that the depth of the interior, you could have double dipped, got Cooper Beebe and got another interior guy and stuck with Tyler Smith, rather than the Guyton pick. I mean, he's penciled in on the depth chart as left tackle, but I can't. It's a massive thing for him to come in.
It would be gamble, wouldn't it? It would be a gamble. But yeah, it doesn't strike me as a great draft either. Not a lot of value there, I don't think, for a lot of them. I was a decent fan of Kalen Carson, and I thought in the 5th round that was pretty decent. But aside from that, I think it's cancelled out because I wasn't a massive Marshawn Neeland fan. And I guess that balances it out when you take him in the 2nd, where even though Dwayne Brewer had a 1st round grade on him, didn't he? Thought he would sneak into the top 1st round, but we'll see. I guess we'll see long term. Jack, yourself with that, your head scratcher.
So again, this is not necessarily like, I wouldn't say the worst draft, certainly in terms of acquiring talent, but I went with Miami, and kind of Rory touched on it just then about, it's really important that we don't just see the draft as being about filling needs. It is about value. It's about more than just, right, what's my roster holes right now? How can I fill them? That said, I think they're in a similar spot to Dallas in that this feels like it's or at least Miami are seeing it this way, as this is their championship window. They have an opportunity to compete. Granted, the AFC is obviously like a gauntlet in terms of getting through that, but they're in that window. So you look at the draft, you take Chop Robinson in the first, which I was lower on Chop because I think he's kind of a designated pass rusher, really. But okay, you've taken him. Now, they needed depth at edge. I think that's fine. They need depth at edge. I wouldn't have gone there in the first round, but right, okay. You go to the second round pick, Patrick Paul from Houston. Don't necessarily dislike the player or the value here, but I think, again, he's a bit like Guyton in that I don't think he's a guy you want starting week one. Now, he's not penciled in to start week one, but it's like, okay, this team had major needs along the offensive line. Like, the offensive line was a problem last year. Teron Armstead's never healthy. That interior is a mess. So taking a guy who is a bit developmental and who's not going to play from the get-go, I don't know. And then you look at the rest of their picks. I like a lot of the players I'm about to name, but I don't get the logic or the plan here, right? You've got Jalen Wright running back in the fourth round. Yes, Devon Achane, there's maybe kind of durability question marks there. But like, that backfield's shown they can get production out of anyone. Like Chris Brooks, who they got out of BYU last year. I don't know if he was day 3 or if he was a UDFA in the end, but like, he produced well. I don't know why, unless it's just we want more fast guys, that you take him in the fourth round here. And I think they traded up to get him as well. Then you get Mo Kamara from Colorado State, the edge rusher, who I don't dislike, but again, it's just a similar kind of thing to Chop in that you've got a designated pass rusher. So do we need 2 of those? I don't understand what the plan is there. And then I think if you were to ask anybody who watched a single snap of the NFL last year, what position do Miami not need help at? Or what position are Miami best at? You'd say wide receiver. They then spend 2 more picks on players in Malik Washington and Taj Washington, who are fine receivers, but they're both undersized, probably slot-only guys in the NFL. So it's like, what's the plan here? Then they also got a safety in the 6th round. That offensive line is going to kill this team again with the way it's looking right now. You look at that interior offensive line. They didn't spend a single pick on their interior offensive line. So they're now set to go into the season with an offensive line, an interior, that consists of Isaiah Wynn, who's primarily been a tackle, played a bit of guard, didn't look good. Aaron Brewer is their center. So he was Tennessee's center, and Tennessee's offensive line was horrendous. And they said, no, it's fine. We'll let him go. That tells you something. And then Robert Jones, who's been a backup on a Miami line that has been a problem for however long. So I just don't see how you sit there and spend picks on designated pass rushers, running backs, and receivers. It almost just feels like you're drafting for like fantasy football here, and like, at some point that offensive line is going to get you killed, whether it's in the regular season or if it's in the playoffs. I just can't see a team with that line making it far. And I don't understand why, when the window is as it is and the Tua situation is as it is, time sensitive, that you don't just go, right, we're just going to spend this draft class to just protect Tua, keep him upright. We've got the guys, we've got the weapons. Let's work from there. I don't understand. Like I say, players, I like a lot of them. I just don't see how it fits. I don't see how this kind of jigsaw comes together.
Yeah, Rory, what about you? What's your assessment?
Yeah, I think that's true, really. That was one of the surprising things for me throughout the draft. I had a lot of teams pegged as needing some help on the interior, and I felt like it was a good draft if you wanted interior offensive linemen.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I know, like, as a Bengals fan, it was something that I was willing them to do on the third day, and we didn't really get involved. We got Matt Lee as a 7th rounder, but I was thinking, the guys that were on the Christian Haynes lasted a little bit longer than I thought. I know Mahogany had injury worries, but he lasted a long time on day 3. And all those sort of guys would do a job for Miami. So yeah, I agree. It's a bit of a head scratcher. You want to protect Tua and see what he can do, don't you? Really, you don't want to leave him out there to dry. And it's strange. McDaniel, I would think, coming from San Francisco, they did invest in their offensive line at San Francisco. And you see how it works. So I think he's offensively. You'd think he'd want that base to work around.
Yeah. And he's like his background is as a run game coordinator. That's why he specializes. So he's a guy who values the trenches and understands the need there. Like, I just struggle to see how, Graham Barton's on the board at 21. How do you? I don't know. How do you? I could understand it if they'd gone, right, we'll take Chop because we think he's in that top tier of edge rushers, and then we'll get an interior offensive lineman and make the most of the class on day 2. It's the fact they didn't address it at all. That's just what confuses me. It's like you had a really good guy who had potentially 4 position versatility staring you in the face at 21. You passed on him, and then you just didn't address it at all. And I just don't see the logic.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a little bit like the Dolphins went shopping at a wholesaler, went into Costco. They just got bulk bought everything, bulk bought edge, bulk bought wide receiver. We've got loads of that stuff at home. Then they rushed around. It's like the first time they went to Costco as well, because they rushed around in awe of what they could get. And then they forgot an item after they got out to the car. They forgot to get interior offensive linemen. So yeah, it struck me as that, what do we need? Oh, need loads of fast guys. And that's what they got. Chop, Jalen Wright, Mo Kamara, Washington, or Malik Washington, who, like I say, some of these people were fans of, but they didn't need them. So yeah, I agree. They head scratcher for a team with a vulnerable quarterback, and also, like you say, who really do need to push it into the middle because they're going to have to pay him. He's played well enough to be paid, and I'm sure that will come down the news cycle any week now. I guess that'll start up once everyone kind of wakes up again after the draft. And they want to win the Super Bowl, and it's going to be Mike McDaniel that pays for it, probably, rather than Tua. I don't know. So yeah, interesting one. Any other head scratchers from either of you moving forward, Rory? Any other teams that you were a bit bemused about?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Don't need to necessarily give us one if you've not.
Falcon feels like I'm kicking a man while he's down. So I don't want to like put the boot in on Atlanta too much. But that was a odd one.
I got to say, I didn't think that many teams really messed up too much in this. Like, I don't think there's any like clear losers. I know I've just talked about the Broncos. I didn't think the Texans had a great draft as well. I thought the Kamara Lassiter pick was bizarre, to say the least. Why would you take a slow nickel corner when you've got Mike Sam still on the board, Max Melton, who we've already mentioned, and then I don't know, just against my board, against my evaluations, just didn't really knock it out of the park. I thought that was a bit of an underwhelming draft after they'd done so well. But yeah, like I say, I don't think anyone really truly fluffed it up. There's mistakes here and there. Obviously, we mentioned the Buffalo trade. I thought that was a bit bizarre. I was never the biggest Keon Coleman guy, which obviously colours my sort of assessment of that as well. But yeah, I think we've kind of covered the main bases without going fully in on Atlanta for that pick. We'll move on to our favourite picks then. We're not going to do least favourite or anything like that. We're just going to keep it light and breezy, keep it positive. Favourite day 1, 2, and 3 picks. Rory, we'll come to you. What's your favourite day 1 pick?
Yeah, so I won't go too deep on it because obviously I've touched on him earlier in the podcast, but Quinion Mitchell, just because he represented really good value. I was waiting for him to come off the board. I think he smashed it out of the park in the pre-draft process. So, obviously there was concerns coming out of Toledo, facing up against sort of lower class opposition at college level. So he did everything that he needed to do to disprove that, went to the Senior Bowl, looked more than comfortable against the top guys there, and then went to the combine athletically, meets all the thresholds that you'd want out of a cornerback number 1. And I think that pushed him ahead of Terrion Arnold there. And I think just the fact that the Eagles were desperate for a cornerback, they didn't have to move off the spot to get the best one. So he represented good value and a perfect team fit.
We've already mentioned Quignon earlier on when you were talking about the Eagles. So I'll just ask both of you this really. Is there any reason to you guys why the corners, the sort of pressure on corners kind of slipped? Because we were expecting them to go much earlier than 22, weren't we? Any theories? And I'll put you on the spot, both of you. So it's not the most kind thing for me to do.
I feel like once it got past Atlanta, the few teams that maybe were going to go corner, there were just, I think, studs at other positions that they couldn't pass. Like, you think Raiders were an obvious landing spot for a corner, I thought, but then with Bowers on the board, I can completely see why they went, we'll go with that. Colts, it was always going to be edge or corner. And again, Latu, if you're willing to overlook the medicals, which obviously they were, then I can see that. So that may be it. But I was surprised. I was like, as someone who thought the Packers were going to pick a corner in the first round, I was like rubbing my hands with glee, like, hey, they're all falling to earth, and obviously they don't. But like, it was a surprise because I think corners have been increasing in value in recent years. I don't know if it's maybe just a reaction to the volatility of the position, maybe, and just concerns about how reliable it is.
The things I don't know about you guys, when I looked at the cornerback class as well, I saw a lot of very good slot corners, but I thought it ran off at outside corners pretty quick, which is why I think in a lot of my mock drafts I had people coming up to take corners, because I thought once you got sort of out of that first round and the top of the second round, are you going to be able to find a starting outside corner? I think the Sandra Strills and the guys that could play slot were good value, but if you were desperate for a number 2 corner, I thought it ran out quick, so I was surprised that they were still on the board.
Yeah, no, good theories. I just thought, it was a bit surprising because, the way that the mocks were going pre-draft was, much earlier, as I mentioned. But I'll stick with mine. We mentioned the Raiders there. They obviously opted to go for Brock Bowers, who turned into my favourite pick of day one. Kind of, giving a lot of props to my fellow AFC West teams there, who was talking up the Chiefs draft. But it kind of pains me to say it, but I thought he was really good. Not a position of need, must have been BPA, but really intriguing pick because it allows them to be multiple out of heavier personnel groupings. We saw the Chiefs be really successful with this over the past couple of years. And I think it's just, codswallop really that it matters that Michael Mayer was there because they're two different types of tight end. So they, just really, really flexible out of 11, 12, maybe even some 13 personnel. You can have the same 11 guys being able to run a bunch of stuff. And I don't look forward to seeing Brock Bowers twice a year after so long of seeing Travis Kelce twice a year, which obviously now that's been extended as well. So that's fantastic for me. But yeah, they've got Zach Gentry as well, so who's a pure blocker. And, they could just be really, really multiple with their tight ends, get really creative. And Brock Bowers and Adams are their best 2 receivers now in Las Vegas. So they could have a lot of pre-snap fun with teams, which should be really interesting. As an objective viewer of the league and just want to see good football played and interesting innovation, I think it's one that will be really, really interesting to see. I think obviously, Jack, you mentioned something similar to this. How did you feel about Bowers? I feel like I might have stolen your pick here because I got him before you with this one.
Yeah, you may have done. I really liked it. I think it is that thing, right? If you've got him and Michael Mayer on the field at the same time, and you're an opposing defense, how do you match up with that personnel wise? I was a big fan of Dalton Kincaid pick last year for the Bills for a similar reason, but I think like Bowers is a kind of better version of what that can be in terms of causing all sorts of headaches, because Kincaid, it's the whole like he's a tight end but he's a receiver, but he's not really an inline blocker, whereas Bowers, he can block. So you can, if defenses like line up in nickel and you've got Mayer and Bowers on the field, just run it and like absolutely road grade them. But then if they're coming out in heavy personnel, if they're playing base, you can just spread it all out. Bowers is effectively a slot. He can even play out wide. Like, I think I'm really hoping they get creative with how they use him. And I think they will. I don't think you make this pick if you're not willing to be creative. So I'm really excited to see how it works.
Yeah, Rory, what about you? How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I think it's like the opposite of what we were saying earlier about, I know when Jack was saying about Miami and I said about Dallas. When you get teams that are close to a Super Bowl, you need certain things. When you're a team like the Raiders or in that top half of the draft, you really need to sort of detach yourself and just say we need to be taking a game changer. And I think he was the clear one that was left on the board. And I think that at that point in the draft, you have to push the button and say, look, we haven't got that much talent on this roster. Now is the time to start adding a guy that's going to be top 5 in his position. And I think that's the value of it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, really, really interesting pick. And like I say, we'll get to see that firsthand, both being AFC fans over the next few years. Jack, we'll come back to you to finish off this little segment on day one.
Yeah, so I went with Byron Murphy going to Seattle. I think this was one I liked pre-draft, and I talked this up as a fit that I really liked. So it was one of those I was pleased to see it come to fruition. I think for me, it's Mike McDonald's obviously moved over there. There's going to be a kind of shift in defensive identity. You look at how he ran that defense in Baltimore, and it was Justin Madubuike was the kind of main man. It was one of the few defenses that you can think of really in the modern NFL that runs through a kind of penetrating 3-tech type rather than an edge. And he's clearly trying to follow that model here. I think Murphy also matches up really well with the guys they've got on the roster. They've got a lot of the kind of big pluggers, nose tackles, physical guys. So you compare him with like a Leonard Williams or, someone who is going to do the hard graft, the dirty work, and then that frees him up to get creative. I think he is going to be the heart and soul of that defense. And I think they've already got some nice pieces in the secondary. I just thought it's just one of those perfect matches between scheme and player that I just think will be really, really interesting to watch.
Yeah, what did you think about Byron Murphy going to Seattle?
Yeah, I was massively disappointed. Obviously, a lot of Bengals fans were praying that he'd stayed on the board till 18. I think he would have been perfect for us. That versatility of being able to move from nose tackle and 3-tech, he can do everything in a draft where I don't think it was really strong defensive tackle. I think I'm surprised somebody didn't step up and take him earlier. So yeah, I think the Seahawks, like you said, the pairing with McDonald should be brilliant, really.
Yeah, no, I'm in full agreement with both of you guys. We'll move on to day 2. Same sort of question, really. Rory, we'll stick with you, actually. I'm excited for this one.
Yep, so I've got one close to your heart, trying to impress the host, obviously. Junior Colton at the Chargers. So obviously, I think we in the group chat, obviously going into day 2, you flagged it up as one that you'd be happy in round 2. Yeah. And I was a bit sort of lukewarm whether I thought he was a day 2. But once you get to the 3rd round, I think then the value meets where I sort of had him pegged. And then just to fit him in with Harbaugh again, he's going to go in there. He knows exactly what's expected of him. And this is, like you said, this is a team that's under transition. They're going to rebuild that defense. And I think he's going to be the guy in the center of it that's going to sort of lead from the front and show the guys that come in. Obviously, you've got Bosa and Khalil Mack that are sort of on the downswing. This is the future. And he's got a tone setter that's going to come in there and do a job. And obviously, the depth at linebacker needed addressing. So it's kind of the perfect marriage, isn't it? Where there's a hole on the roster. It's a guy that the head coach knows better than anybody else, and the value in the 3rd round. So yeah, hits on all those counts.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I would have been happy with this in the 2nd. I think more because of it's difficult for us. Obviously, when we're doing this sort of thing, we draft for 32 teams, but then obviously each GM, each head coach is only drafting for their team. I think we probably value Junior Colson a lot more than other teams, considering, like you say, he just comes in and knows what the defense is. He's going to be teaching the veterans on the Chargers roster what the defense is, where to line up, etc. And I think he will be the green dot, and he will be like a mainstay in the spine of that defense. So yeah, no, really happy with this one. And yeah, even better that we could wait, because I think it was a lot of consternation whether he would be still there at this pick, whether we when we took Ladd McConkey, when we traded up for him especially, would he be there? Was that the chance that we need to take? Because this is one that I mentioned to you, as you kind of mentioned in the group chat earlier. I thought this was a Michigan defender in the 2nd round, and it turned out it was the 3rd round, which can't complain about, can you? So yeah, no, really, really happy with this one. Jack, what about you? What do you think of Junior Colson coming to the Chargers?
Yeah, I love it for the same reasons you guys have mentioned. I think it's He knows what he's doing. It's going to be a seamless transition that we rarely, if ever, see. And I think he's just going to be able to add value from day one at a position of need and be that kind of tone setter. I think this draft, as much as anything for the Chargers, was about getting those kind of tone setters, those personalities in the locker room. Colson knows exactly what Harbaugh wants, and he obviously brings it. So I think it'll be a nice kind of foundational piece to then build around.
Yeah, definitely. So tell us why Javon Bullard was your favorite day 2 pick.
I had to sneak a Homer pick in here, didn't I? Somehow. Yeah, so I just really like this one. Like I say, sometimes the Packers picks for me can be maybe a little underwhelming on the day, but I really like this one. The Packers needed help in the secondary. There's a need at corner. There's a need at safety. Obviously, Bullard had played kind of nickel and then much more kind of free safety in 2023 for Georgia. Packers need help at both spots. So that versatility, I think, is really important. I think, if you look at what the GM has been saying in terms of what he wants from his safeties, it's that ability to line up deep in the box, in the slot, kind of just mix things up. So I think just getting that kind of player who can be that versatile piece in the secondary is really important. A lot of Packers fans wanted Brian Branch last year, including me. And I think, I'm not saying Bullard is Brian Branch, but I think he's a similar sort of player. Like he's not the biggest, but he's got that kind of feisty temperament, willing tackler, good at coming downhill. I've watched far too many Packers teams over the years with like defenders who can't tackle and who aren't necessarily willing. So getting that kind of tone setting, it's a similar thing to the Colson pick, right? We've got a new DC coming in. He's clearly wanting to put a stamp on this team. Getting that tone setting guy who is like physical, wants to hit people, like that's just fun, right? Like just that's the kind of defense that is fun to watch as a fan. And I think he's just a nice schematic fit. So I was really, really pleased with this one. So that's why I picked it.
Yeah, it's a completely remade safety room, isn't it? Over one off season with obviously Xavier McKinney and then Oladipo and Evan Williams if he's going to be a safety as well. It's a real revamped safety room alongside.
Yeah, it's one of those things with Green Bay where like we've talked about double dipping. Like Gutekunst triple dips a lot if it's a position in need, like wide receiver last year, right? That wide receiver room was awful. And then we come away from the draft with a bunch of guys. And same thing here with safety. It's like just throw resources at it and get the coaches to figure it out, which again, it's worked, right? So like I think it'll be interesting to see how it all shapes out. Like lots of new bodies, lots of new faces.
Roy, got any thoughts on this pick?
Yeah, like you say, the versatility of it matched with he's just bringing. I'm a bit of a homer for the SEC, really. I watch a lot of SEC football. I'm an Alabama fan, so and it's bringing those guys in that just know that's. I think for me, that's the easiest transition is coming from the SEC straight into NFL football. So you're going to get somebody that's used to competing for national championships and bringing those guys in. It used to be Alabama. And now Georgia and obviously the Michigan guys. I think all those guys coming into the league will hit the ground running. So I think it is a good pick in that sense.
And then to round off our analysis of this day, I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit. I'm just going to talk about Washington's whole second round. 3 picks, relatively close together throughout the round, I guess. But I couldn't decide between one of them. So like I said, I'm just going to cheat and just say that I'm going to talk about all 3. They almost made it into my favourite pick segment above. But yeah, coming away with Johnny Newton, Mike Sainristil, and Ben Sinnott at 36, 50, and 53, I just thought it was just unbelievable. I thought it was just a really good trio of picks. I thought Washington, we talked about this on our podcast that we did the mock draft. I think it was the final one we did, but we thought they might package them up to go and get another first rounder, but maybe for a defensive tackle in the late 20s, early 30s. But by standing still in the, by standing still in the second round, they've got a first round talent in Johnny Newton. They have the best nickel defender in the class potentially in Sainristil, and someone in both senses that's been talking about first round talent, someone who might have snuck into the first round in Sainristil's sense, and then Ben Sinnott, who came in, was the second tight end and can do some fullback stuff as well. So versatile piece. And she's just going to be lined up all over the formation because you can also do some receiver stuff as well. So I think you just get a lot of value from those picks, a lot of versatility. I think of that after obviously taking the quarterback, which obviously was the obvious thing to do, just is great value. And as much as we can't all agree maybe that Jaden Daniels was the pick, but it obviously was the pick for them. I wouldn't have picked him. I would have picked Drake May. But in their eyes, they're going to have said they nailed that pick, and then they went ahead and nailed the second day, on the Saturday as well. So it's for Adam Peters, who's a first-time GM, another first-time GM that really had a great weekend, and I thought that that really cemented it as one of the best drafts and one of my favourite drafts as well. Anything to pick out from these three picks, or just Washington drafts at all, from you, Rory?
Yeah, I just think Sam Still was everybody's favourite player, wasn't he? When you listen to all the pre-draft pods, everybody was. I mean, it's only his size really that was holding him back, but at the same time, it's what makes him a nickelback, isn't it? If you part of him, he's part of the package. That is what he does, and I think, like you said, Johnny Newton was a faller, so you're getting value there. And I know Josh Edwards, who writes for us, does a lot of Washington stuff for us. He stayed up and saw the Johnny Newton pick, and I think he might have gone to bed. And I was sort of dropped him a text in the morning saying, "You've got something nice to wake up to there," because there were three brilliant picks from my. I thought on my board they made a lot of sense.
What about yourself, Jack? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was a big Ben Sinnott fan from day one, so I'm really happy with the landing spot for him. I think I know I've seen some people say like that was too early for him, but I think he can be a real good tight end at the NFL level with a bit of kind of ability to do a bit of everything. So I like that. And those other two, I don't know what it was that caused Newton to fall. I assume it was injuries or medical stuff, but like the fact that he was still there, like the Falcons took I'm not going to say the name, a different defensive tackle over him. So to have him in the second round, like we'd been talking about him as being, top 20 pick potentially. So yeah, and Sam Still like just another gritty, fun slot corner. That I think, yeah, these are just the tone setting pieces of a draft. Like I say, regardless of what we think of the quarterback that they took, I think there's clearly a lot of sense to how they're building this team.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And just to touch on the decision to, obviously from the Falcons' point of view, to take Rook in a vacuum, I think it's quite a good pick because I like him as a player from my point of view. But to then add in the trade up and then not to take Johnny ahead of him, just makes it a bit of a head scratcher, doesn't it? But we said we didn't go all in on the Falcons, and we're kind of straying into it a little bit. But maybe I'm adding to that. But yeah, we'll move on swiftly into day three. So yeah, favorite day three pick again. I'll kick off this one. Mine was Tanner Bortolini going to the Colts. As we well know, Chris Ballard has a type. He wants athleticism, and Tanner Bortolini is about as athletic as you can get as an interior offensive lineman. He might not start immediately. Will Fries is listed as the left guard, and obviously at centre they've got Ryan Kelly, who is 30 years old and had a bit of injury. So maybe the pathway is not immediate, but it's not long, I wouldn't say, until he makes a contribution. So I think that you can see him making the Colts better in 2024. Obviously, you've got Anthony Richardson there. Shane Steichen is really going to lean into the creative run game. I'm sure there can't be a reason why they wouldn't take him if not. So having athletic guards and centers to do that sort of thing is pretty mandatory, I would say, throughout that sort of coaching regime with this quarterback coach combination. I'm not going to make this direct comp, but obviously Shane Steichen's last stop before becoming the head coach of the Colts was in Philadelphia with Jason Kelce. Like I said, not comparing Tanner Bortolini to Jason Kelce, but it's impossible to do this sort of comparison with Jalen Hurts obviously being an Anthony Richardson style quarterback. So long-term vision for that pick maybe is that, maybe it's not, but it's not out of the realms of possibility, I wouldn't say. So, just looking ahead, that's a nice schematic fit, I would say. And as we've kind of mentioned earlier on, just as part of a wider Colts draft that was really good, I thought. What about your thoughts? Jack, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I like that. I think, Steichen likes to get creative with how that offensive line moves around. Lots of kind of counter and similar kind of concepts there. So getting a guy who can move around, who can play in space, who's got that movement skills is really important. Yeah, he was. I think when we did one of the Go for Two pods, I had him as my guy on the interior offensive line class. So you'll hear no arguments from me on this one.
Roy, what do you think of Tanner Bottolini?
Yeah, I think it's probably the Ryan Kelly succession plan, isn't it? Really, on the face of it, and that sort of adds to the value of it, and the fact that he can sit and learn behind Kelly, and also gives him a year to sort of maybe add a little bit of functional strength. I know there was the clip that was from the Senior Bowl. I don't know who it was that bull rushed him and completely took him completely off his feet. I know those one-on-ones are always skewed to the defensive players, but just stuff like that really, where if he has a year to get into an NFL sort of strength and conditioning program, you're going to see the benefit of it, and potential starter down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Rory, we'll stick with you for your favourite day 3 guy. Already been mentioned on this one so far.
Yeah. So we're going to go stick along the offensive line. Christian Jones out of Texas. I thought we had him. He went to Arizona in the 5th round, and like you say, he was the 2nd round. I think DJ had him in the 2nd.
Yeah, 52,
round.
I think overall. Yeah.
Yeah, so really good value. When I watched him on tape, he's similar to when I watched Braxton Jones, and I watched him, and you think, I don't see what this guy does that wrong. He's massive frame, he's got length, and he's just difficult to move. And sometimes you can overcomplicate offensive line sort of when you look at them, and you just have to think, can this person be moved off the line? Are you going to end up back onto the quarterback? And I thought he just didn't look like that happened very often to him. So when you get to the 5th round, I think that represents fantastic value. I think he allowed 1 sack last year. And now Arizona he's not going to start in Arizona. He's obviously Paris Johnson's there, and they've signed Jonah Williams to 2 years, $30 million. But I've lived through the Jonah Williams experience as a Bengals fan, and I can tell you that I don't think that he'll be there long term. He's not going to be the guy that's going to lock up your tackle position forever. I still think that Williams would be better moving inside. I think he could be a really dominant guard. I always have done. And obviously the Bengals had him at left tackle and then moved him to right tackle, and he's serviceable and he'll do a job for Arizona. But I wouldn't be surprised in a couple of years when his contract's out if Jones is the guy that comes in and takes his slot.
Yeah, good forward plan. I thought as part of my wider assessment of the Cardinals that I went through earlier. But Jack, what do you think about Christian Jones? Really big slide.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. We said about how some of these offensive linemen kind of fell a little bit. Again, it's just another smart pick from the Cardinals. Just kind of getting those pieces in place, planning for the future. If you can get a potential starter in the long term that late on, then you're absolutely cooking. So, and it's such a low risk pick at that point as well. Like those are the kind of day 3 picks you want to be making. It's like a swing for the fences, and like if it doesn't work, fine. But if it does, it's really worked. So I think, yeah, those are always the kind of day 3 picks that make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll stick with you, Jack, then to round out day 3 for us.
Yeah, I've gone with my guy. I've gone with Audric Estime going to the Broncos. I like the fit because I think I can see him getting some playing time. Obviously, I know there's been the Javonte Williams situation, and him getting back to what he was pre-injury. I think everyone who has ever watched him hopes he gets back to that, because he's one of the most dynamic runners I've seen in a long time. But I think Estime, he's just an NFL back, and I don't understand. I think he was overthought because of those testing numbers. He ran whatever it was, like a 4.7, or was it even a 4.8? I don't know what it was. It was awful. But like he clocked like 20 miles per hour on the GPS, right? In game speed. So this guy, he's not a burner, but he's fast enough by NFL standards. Got good vision. He can be a solid contributor on passing downs. Like he just feels like one of those guys who, there's always a few running backs like this that kind of slide if you want to. But I don't know if it is a slide based on where he was ranked pre-draft, but certainly for me, it felt like it was. And then come out of day 3 and you're like, oh yeah, this guy's pretty good. Like we've got a productive, serviceable guy, just well-rounded. So I can see him making an impact there. So definitely a name I'm going to be keeping an eye out for as the season rolls around.
Rory, what do you think of this one?
I like Estime. I really like the tape. And the thing that stood out to me was that the testing wasn't good, but when you watch the tape, he was making home run hits as well. He was running away from people. It wasn't one of these things where he breaks through and then 5 yards later somebody brings him down. He was making touchdown runs. And he's obviously got that build where he can take the workload, which I think Denver need to. If I was running Denver, I'd want to put a heavy workload away from Bo Nix and become a fairly physical running team, and then let Nix sort of game manage the rest of it. So I think he's built that way, and that could be the solution where he can take a bit of the pressure off with some hard hitting runs.
Do you think Sean Payton's going to do that?
No.
I've been too complimentary about a couple of the teams in my division, so I had to throw in further shade on the other one. So, but yeah, no, that'll bring us to the close of this one, guys. Thanks for joining us for this one. It's been really fun to kind of review these classes, talk about some players, and I think you guys have already both moved on to the 25 class, so I'm lagging behind you guys. So yeah, hats off to you guys for that. But yeah, even though the draft is over, if you're frantically trying to research draft polls for your team or teams that you're playing your division, our draft guide is still available for £3. So you can check out our write-ups of players. I don't think it loses its value after the draft. I think it remains as valuable as ever. So yeah, even if you're preparing for your fantasy drafts, come in, have a look at the offensive players. You have £3. It's less than a cup of coffee. So like I say, go over to Touchdown. There's still adverts all over our website for that one. Big question, Jack. Are we getting in a draft guide next year that's bigger and better?
That's the plan. How much bigger and how much better is TBC? But yeah.
You sounded weary when you answered that at the beginning.
I'm not gonna lie, I have already started kind of putting it together, but then I do it for like 10 minutes. I'm like, no, I've had enough.
There we go. Yeah, I can't wait to be part of the team that puts that together as it was this year. So yeah, like I said, that kind of brings our curtain down on our draft coverage for this year. But there'll be content streaming all throughout the summer towards the NFL. So yeah, like I say, go over to the Touchdown website, touchdown.co.uk, and over to our Twitter handle at Touchdown NFL for all of our writers. And yeah, the NFL pod will be around sporadically over the next few months, but we are going to step away a little bit. But there is plans for a college football podcast, Rory. Is that correct?
Yeah, fingers crossed. We'll be doing some draft content. We'll be tapping into Jack's knowledge and his start that he's made on the 2025 class, hopefully with a draft pod, and then maybe some pods that are based more around the college football side of things, and looking ahead, sort of looking at the programs that are going to be in the mix for the expanded college playoffs next year.
Yeah, lots to look forward to in the college scene as well. So yeah, like we always say, there's lots of things to come on the Touchdown. So yeah, stick with us. But yeah, love to sign it off here with another great show under our belts, lads. So yeah, like I say, thanks for joining us on this one, and we will see you in the very near future.